Meeting for March 28th. We'll start off with the approval of the minutes, item number 1 for the February 28th meeting.
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the minutes from the February 28, 2019 minute.
I'll second.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Next, conditional use permit for major home occupation B for hair salon at 61 West, 2250 South for Rachel Olpen.
Okay, I'll introduce that briefly as she's coming up. Sorry, we can poke in. The applicant's requesting to do a hair salon from her home. It's a new one in the Parkwood subdivision. I've met and reviewed the ordinances with her and talked about her typical use as the hair salon. Again, by appointment and typically throughout the week. She's maybe expecting about 5 hours worth of work during the week. Currently, they are improving the space to have the spot for it. I'll let her maybe speak more about that, but based on my understanding and discussion with her, it was my recommendation to approve the request without additional conditions.
Okay. Are there any questions? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not really. We're just new 20, 30 hours a week at the very most. So
Okay.
it never should have more than 2 people there at the same time.
And Lyle probably discussed that with you. One of the major concerns would be just traffic and in and out and parking and that kind of stuff. And so obviously be sensitive to that, and the way these conditional use permits work is that if we have complaints, then you might be brought back to the commission and try to resolve those complaints and concerns. So the best way to do this is to make it so that the people around you don't have any problems and aren't impacted negatively by this, and then you'll.
Sounds great.
Great. Did that?
You're finishing your basement. Are you going to have a side entrance or?
Yep, we have a separate entrance, a sidewalk that goes along the side of the house and then just goes straight down just into the space that we're finishing for the salon, and that's it. So,
Good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great. Well, then I'll take a motion if we're ready.
I'll make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B hair salon for Rachel Olpen at 61 West, 2250 South.
Second. Aye.
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 Good luck. Okay, next is a conditional use permit for an addition to a church meeting house for Paul Clifton Kaysville Church of Christ at 490 South Angel Street.
Okay, I'll give a brief introduction to this, and we have Mr. Clifton and representation for them as well here this evening. So the property here on the corner, just kind of right off of Webb and Leola and Angel Street, been around for some time. Paul could probably correct us and tell us exactly how long it's been there, but they're looking for some changes to get some new space. So you can see here on the site plan, what they're essentially doing is pushing out the west end of the built parking area. So they're losing a couple stalls, but reconfiguring it, still able to keep, I think the number is 53 if I recall, on site. What that looks like to the building, you can see here on the right side of the screen is the new addition with the original, and then the new changes on the bottom part of the picture. You can see the enlarged building here and gives them some additional square footage. And ultimately what it does, as I've looked over this, and I think Mr. Clifton can speak to some of the use, by pushing the chapel out, they gain a couple classrooms in there, but also some additional chapel space as part of that. Another drawing that they put here that just shows the kind of conceptual rendering of what the space looks like. Bear with me, I'm getting in close here on the notes. So the typical concern that was we talked about just now with that other use is the parking. And so based off of the occupancy alone, and occupancies, speaking with Mr. Clifton here as well in particular, a pretty large max number, whether or not that many people truly fit in there and would use the pews that way. But based on that and the Kaysville City parking requirements,
Are there any questions of the applicant? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not particularly. On two sides of those neighbors is a member of the congregation. On the other side is Dick Saunders, and I've personally visited with him about the expansion. And so there, as far as I know, there are no objections that way. So.
And this is Mr. Saunders' property to the south, and this would be his congregation.
And the move's going to go towards Leola, right? Or is it,
It'll
it's
go
that
west.
way? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, right here.
Well,
So has parking been a concern at all in the past? It doesn't seem, or is there, where do they overflow if they do?
Thus far, no. It's been plenty adequate. I think we're giving up 2 or 3 spaces.
Is all.
Lyle?
Yeah, I think they lose 3 total stalls if I.
51, I believe.
Okay.
Which is still more than the minimum, right?
So yeah, so they're losing 5 total stalls. They need to keep at least 51 based on requirement, but they're providing 53. So they still meet and exceed my calculation based on the building occupancy and our zoning requirement and the amount of needed parking, but they are.
Lyle, is there any, I think I know the answer to this, but just confirm, I suppose, any zone in Kaysville where a religious use or a institutional use is not a conditional use?
No, so they're only allowed essentially in our ag and residential zoning districts.
But they're all conditional use.
And
in
it's all
those.
by conditional use.
Wilf, is that pretty common, like for religious uses to be, I mean, it's kind of like you have to permit them, it's like you're mandated to permit them in many places, many zones, right? But they're up to the municipality whether they want to permit them or be conditional uses, or is that, how does it?
Want to have is permitted and what is conditional, but we just tell everybody, consider a conditional use pretty much a permitted use. You're just putting some conditions on it if it needs it.
Right. I guess I'm thinking for religious uses, just out of curiosity.
Perhaps to
Oh,
what you're
for
saying,
religion?
Commissioner
Yeah, I
Sunlife,
see
is
what you-
we have to allow them somewhere in some fashion.
Yes, okay.
And that's how Kaysville's historically chosen to do, is to
Right.
allow them by that means.
Yeah, I think you're fine as long as you're not effectively preventing.
Yeah.
are you thinking about starting a new church or a new permit somewhere? Are we going to
No.
compete with our applicant here? No, I'm glad to say that, you know, that you have need for expansion. I think that's great. I mean, I'm these days, so I'm glad that you get to, have need for greater space and more use, so good for you.
Just for your information, the building is strictly used for religious purposes. Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday evening is when the congregation meets. And there are no other activities that take place outside maybe a Bible study from time to time. But no commercial activities or recreational activities or anything like that.
Okay.
So,
Great. Are there any concerns, or should we move to the motion?
I'll make a motion that we grant a conditional use permit for addition to a church meeting, Church of Christ, at 490 South Angel Street.
I'll second that.
Aye.
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 thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right, next is the final plat for the Prigmore Legacy subdivision for Heidi Nettleton at 233 South, 400 East.
Okay, so this particular subdivision, you'll recall, just off of 4th South near the Davis High School driving range, was before the commission, ultimately the city council, to receive approval of the PRED overlay to allow for the flag lots, and also the plat they provided at the time showed the existing home staying on the front lot, with 2 new lots being created in a flag lot configuration to the east, labeled there as Lot 1 and 2 on the preliminary. The applicant's been working with the surveyor, putting together the final plat document. It's consistent with the preliminary that has been approved and contains the lot sizes and everything that are compliant with the flag lot provisions in the zoning district where it's located. Based on the reviews of that from staff, we're ready to recommend approval of the final plat for the Prigmore Estates subdivision. Prigmore Legacy subdivision.
Okay, great, thank you.
Nope, looks
Concerns?
pretty standard, hasn't really deviated.
Lyle, can you remind me, is the road that they're going to put in, is it a driveway or is it a road?
Yeah, so with the flag lot, they're not required to build a road. So what we require is that the access, and I don't know how clear this is. So there are 2 access points. Each lot has to own out to the street. You can see a fun to point and click together if I get it to work. There we go. So the lots 2 and every lot on this, by way of ownership, has access out to 400 East. And the flag lots are only required to have stems 18 feet of width. And so there's 36 total feet in area south of the existing lot. And they'll share a 20-foot wide drive. And the difference between your drive and a street basically is the curb gutter type improvements that you'll see on a street. This would just be like a typical driveway, at least 20 feet in width, kind of run right down the middle.
Thank you.
And I think we talked about this when this came before us most recently, but the code doesn't allow them to share that one access, right? Is that correct?
So in practice, they will kind of share it. So let me go to the image here. So you can see the blank vacant area just south of the existing house. So only one driveway is going to be poured that goes back to 2 lots. And so it'll look like one driveway, but it's going to have legal access the way that the plat egress or shared access easement in favor of both of those properties. And so that's, while they both own a fraction of it, so that way they have some shared maintenance and responsibility for it because they each control half of the drive. They also each own just a portion of it as their ownership out to the street.
Will they have some kind of an understanding, like for snow removal, and that seems like it could be a little cumbersome?
Yeah, typically they'd have to work that out amongst them. So because of the way we allow it to be platted, it doesn't require an HOA type association be set up. It's not technically a facility owned in common. And so they would make arrangements amongst each other as who takes care of what. But ultimately it's a private facility, so the city's not responsible for plowing it, taking care of it, maintaining it, that type of.
That was all I had.
The applicant's here. Do you want to ask about whether you've got that worked out?
Do you have any questions? Oh, as far as the
Joint maintenance.
drive?
Yeah.
Well, we haven't, I knew that was an issue, but we haven't quite got that figured out. I mean, it really depends on if one lot sells and one house goes up and another doesn't go up for a little, that into the sale of the
Yeah,
lot.
just have it recorded against the property, and
Yeah.
whoever buys it subject to that, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, are we ready for a motion?
I'd make a motion that we grant final plat approval for the Prigmore Legacy subdivision at 233 South 400 East as presented and as per staff recommendation.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Good luck.
All right.
We're finished.
Now, call the public. Anyone there, anyone here interested in voicing their opinion about something or other? Come on up.
I'd like to hear a little bit about the expansion or the remodel that may be taking place is that of this building?
Oh.
For the city hall.
Oh,
Yeah. Is anybody here authorized or knowledgeable enough
Lyle?
to talk
We have
about
two
that?
council members
We
there.
have two
It's the right group, but there's people here that are,
We have a little bit of
But
information on it.
there's some firemen out in the audience, they might know.
And if it's a little premature, that's fine. I
No.
just got the notice in the mail, and
Yeah.
I'm curious.
We
Lyle,
can either
Maybe I'll
confirm
give
or
a-
deny
Yes,
that.
Yeah, maybe a
without,
30-second version. I'd be happy to visit in more detail about it. So the city's been looking for several years for this building here. The staff and departments that operate out of here have identified a need for additional space. Currently, we feel that we're short on what we need to function, and we're growing, and that need will continue to rise. And so previously, we looked at the building just next door, the old library building. That didn't happen. And so the current discussion is just this existing building where we're at, remodel work and expansion of it as an addition to accommodate that identified need. So we can talk a little more if you'd like, or if you got other specific questions. But
What did you say about the library?
so right now, the old library building is just kind of off the table. City's not got any proposals for use of it, nor are they deciding to be rid of it. It's just been sitting there. A museum committee was given permission by the city council. I'm going to get the time frame wrong, but some time ago, where they're pursuing possible funding to restore it and potential use for it.
Look. Next is calendars, reports.
Yeah, so calendar, we'd just be on again for April the 11th. We have noticed a couple ordinance. We'd like to discuss some of the business license items that we've talked about, and we'll have something prepared for you ahead of time to look at. And then also essentially changes to some subdivision standards to deal with pressure irrigation and on what we require east of 89. So those, at least that one, once it's explained, is fairly straightforward, and we'll talk about that next week. I think otherwise of merit for reporting, we had our kickoff meeting with the consultant that we've selected, the Langdon Group, for our strategic planning process. So that will be rolling along, and there will be involvement. We'll probably be reaching out to you as we decide exactly at what level, participation from the Planning Commission and input on that. And by way of good news, and the timing is yet to be determined, but we also just received funding from WFRC to do a general plan update, a strategic planning and visioning process, and we'll look forward to that later in the year as well. So get ready to dive into planning stuff. That should be fun.
That'd be good.
And unless there's questions of myself or things from the Planning Commission report, we'll just be back in a couple weeks.
We need a motion to adjourn. Gary, is that
Yeah, so moved.
great? Thank you.